Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to go through the 2017 American romance movie, Everything, Everything. The film starts in an aesthetic sunroom where a girl named Maddie tells us that it's her favorite room. It's surrounded by glass so she can imagine being outside all the time. In her imagination, we see her falling outside and standing before a magnificent ocean. She walks in and starts floating, but her imagination then fades out and she's back in her room. Maddie then explains that she owns 100 white t-shirts, and her clothes are irradiated. Moreover, her house is airlocked, and if she goes outside, she'd die. The reason is that she has severe combined immunodeficiency disease and SCID, due to which she can't handle any fight with bacteria or viral infections. In order to keep up with her routine, she's joined several online social groups. She reads novels and writes reviews about the stories. Also, she's taken an online architecture class through which she makes different models at home. Maddie walks towards the window of her room, and there, she crosses eyes with a boy who skates across the road. They share a smile, and Maddie returns to her room. It's revealed that Maddie's mother is a doctor, and she's the one who treats her. They both spend a lot of quality time together. On Maddie's birthday, they cut a cake and watch a movie. But just as they're sitting, the doorbell rings. Outside, there's the neighborhood boy with his sister. He introduces himself as Ollie and offers them a cake since they just moved to the neighborhood. Maddie's mother, Pauline, apologizes and states that she can't accept it. In the meantime, Maddie's watching them through the CCTV camera. A smile appears on her face. Pauline then sends them away. After a while, Ollie goes to his own room and Maddie watches him from her window. Ollie also nears his bedroom window and they both wave at each other. The following day, we get to know about Maddie's nurse, named Carla. She's been there for almost 15 years. She enters the house, sterilizes herself, and offers a new novel to Maddie. In her affection, Maddie gives Carla a tight hug. During the following few days, Ollie would click the windows every single night. Every night, he also put up the cake on the windowsill and does something stupid with it. Eventually, on the fourth night, he writes his phone number on the window and Maddie immediately texts him. She then starts imagining herself with Ollie. He asks her why she's in house arrest, and Maddie tells him that she's actually not. Instead, she says that she has some complications due to which she can get sick if she goes outside. Afterwards, they have more regular conversations and play different games together. One time, Ollie asks her about her parents, and Maddie states that her father and brother died in a car accident. She also explains that she can't go outside due to her SCID. As their conversation comes to an end, Ollie says that he wants to meet her in person. After that, Maddie simply waves him goodbye. Later, she receives a text where Ollie asks her to come to the window. Once she does that, he asks her about her eye color and compliments her beauty. Maddie blushes and moves away from the window. The following morning, she's on the laptop with a smile plastered on her face. Carla asks her about it, and Maddie quickly closes the laptop. Carla instantly understands what's up and states that Maddie is not very good at hiding things. She then mentions that she's also seen Maddie constantly checking her emails and looking out for Ollie in the window. Later that day, Maddie suggests that maybe Ollie can visit. He could get decontaminated and they'd sit far apart. Carla hesitates, but then condemns the act as Maddie's mother would never allow her. Therefore, she rejects the idea. Afterwards, we get introduced to Carla's daughter, Rosa. She meets with Maddie and they both sit beside the window where Maddie talks majestically about Ollie. As they're talking, Carla enters the room and asks Rosa to come as they're already leaving. Gradually, things start to become interesting for Maddie. One night, Ollie arrives at her favorite room and stands outside the glass window. Maddie approaches the glass pane and begins to imagine herself with Ollie. In her imagination, he enters the room, but just before they can kiss each other, Ollie knocks on the glass, snapping her back to reality. They then both put their hands against the glass window and keep them there for a while. During the following days, Maddie gets herself a credit card and orders a sweater online. When she gets the sky blue sweater, her mother compliments her. One day, Carla comes to her room and mentions that Ollie's there. She then gives further instructions to Maddie and asks her to sit as far away as possible from him. Maddie can't believe her ears. Slowly and timidly, she goes to the living room, where she finds him standing at the other end. An awkwardness arises between them as they both watch each other. Ollie then breaks the ice by stating that both of them are nervous and that it's okay. He then sparks a conversation and asks about the room. Maddie tells him that her mother built it for her so she can have a connection to outside. She expresses her wish to see the ocean and mentions that it's her favorite place. Both of them then become silent as they look at each other. Ollie plays with his wristbands and Snap throws it across the room. Neither of them picks it up, so they both begin to edge closer. Just then, Carla comes into the room and the moment comes to an end. Just after their brief visit, Maddie becomes enchanted by her romantic thoughts. Carla notices her trance and mentions that Maddie can see Ollie in a week. But Maddie can't seem to wait, so she calls Ollie and states that Carla has the Tuesday night off and her mom is working a double shift, so he could come over and together they could watch the fireworks. On Tuesday, Maddie's mother talks to her and confirms that she'd be fine without her and Carla. Maddie assures her that she'd be completely okay. Later that night, Ollie sits across from her on the sofa. After the brief introductory talks, Maddie gets up and sits beside him on the sofa. Between them, there's a small silence. Ollie tries to compliment her, but she states that they should just be friends. After that, he simply gets up and walks to the glass window. Maddie follows him and starts moving closer to him. Pushing their luck, Maddie takes a leap and slowly goes in for a kiss. With that, their passion blows up, and after the kiss, Maddie leans into his arms and the scene fades out. Later, she's talking on the phone and mentions that she's completely fine and not feeling ill at all. On the contrary, she feels perfect. With that, their day becomes a golden one. Unfortunately, one morning, things don't go so well. Ollie gets into a row with his dad, fighting on the street. Maddie watches, and without another thought, dashes out of the house to his rescue. She approaches him on the street and tries to make sure that Ollie's fine. Just then, Pauline runs after her and forces her back in the house. Pauline and Maddie then have an argument since it's not safe for her to go outside, especially for strangers. Maddie stays silent, which makes her mother realize that Ollie is actually not a stranger to her anymore. Later that night, Pauline talks with Maddie and listens to her as she explains that Ollie was just trying to protect his mother. Maddie goes on and tells her that he's always wearing black and that he's kind. Pauline notices Maddie's affection for him and says that she's sorry. Maddie then sits beside Pauline and starts talking about her father with her. Pauline mentions that Maui was his favorite place. She then confronts Maddie about whether she has actually met Ollie. Maddie denies it, but her mother silently puts a black wristband in her hands and states that yes, you've met him. The next morning, Maddie wakes up to a commotion occurring downstairs. Her mother is shouting at Carla for letting a stranger in the house. Maddie immediately goes downstairs, but her mother is adamant on firing Carla from the job. Maddie tries to defend her nurse as she's her only real friend, but her mother doesn't listen at all and forcibly makes Carla leave the house. In tears, Carla gives a hug to Maddie and leaves. Unfortunately, just as Carla goes out of sight, Maddie becomes sick. She throws up in the sink and suffers from a severe fever. After a day, she gets up and sits by the window where she talks to Ollie and tells him that she has no phone or internet. Ollie then uses papers to ask if she's okay, and Maddie nods in affirmation. Within a few days, Maddie gets a grumpy old nurse by the name of Nurse Janet or Mrs. Pritchard. Nurse Janet is extremely strict on rules, regulations, and timing. Maddie gets annoyed by the sticky note reminders Nurse Janet keeps putting up. Additionally, her mother tells her that Ollie isn't hers. He'd get a new girl and only be for her. That idea makes Maddie imagine Ollie with a different girl as he sits in his car and gets close to her. Maddie begins to decide to let him go. She imagines herself in a library where an astronaut walks in and tells her to call him. As they talk, Maddie runs around the library and states that they don't have a future together, and they can't stay together. With that, their call ends. The following morning, Maddie wakes up and goes to the sunroom to find dozens of pictures of oceans pasted on the window, with a note that states, "Maddie, every ocean deserves to be seen by you." This makes her chuckle and gives her new energy and the sudden urge to travel. Therefore, she writes a letter to her mother mentioning all the good qualities and telling him what she wants for herself. After writing it, she buys the plane tickets and packs up to leave at once. As soon as she steps out of the house, everything comes into vivid focus. She starts noticing everything around her: the birds chirping, the leaves rustling, and the refreshing greenery. With those mixed feelings, she goes to Ollie's house and calls him outside. Together, they decide to go on a vacation to Hawaii. They get in Ollie's truck and embark on their adventure. Back at Maddie's house, Pauline finds the letter and tears start flowing down her cheeks as she realizes that her daughter has left. Meanwhile, Maddie and Ollie board the plane and together fly to Hawaii. Upon landing, they receive flowers. The couple then travels to a hotel and settles down, where there's only a single king-sized bed in the room. After a thought, they eat fruit together and start settling in. Meanwhile, Pauline calls the cops, and we see them leaving her driveway. Ollie's sister walks by, and Pauline immediately stops her to ask about Ollie's whereabouts. She denies knowing and walks away after apologizing. Meanwhile, Maddie and Ollie walk into a clothing store where Maddie puts up a mustard-colored swimsuit. Ollie mentions that it's pretty small, but nevertheless, they go out to the wide ocean to experience the waves and freedom. They spend some quality time there together and later go cliff jumping. Maddie becomes scared for a while, but takes a leap of faith and jumps straight into the water. Following their adventure, they both walk along the beach in the setting sun. Later, they sit together and talk about life. Maddie states that she came here with her father when she was very young. After listening to her, Ali explains the crisis at his home and how his mother doesn't leave his abusive father. Nevertheless, their conversation turns into intimate romance, and when they return to the bedroom, their passion turns into ecstasy and pleasure. The next day, Maddie wakes up and walks to the bathroom where she suddenly starts feeling really sick. In a moment, she drops to the ground and goes unconscious. She's immediately taken to the hospital where she spends days in the ICU. During her sick time, she visualizes herself in a field with Ali but drops to the ground. Afterward, we learn that her heart actually stopped for some time. Her mother treats her for days, far away from Ali. She drops all contact and imagines herself floating in space with him. Slowly, they're drifting apart. As the days go on, Maddie gets an email from Ali asking her to talk to him. She doesn't open it for a day, but that night looks out her window and watches him leaving with his family. Immediately, she reads the email and finds out that he's moving back to New York with his mom. Maddie gets remorseful but composes herself nonetheless. Time goes on, and one day, she receives a call from Dr. Francis, who attended her in Maui. She mentions that her heart had stopped due to a viral infection. She talks with Maddie about her SCID and says that she doesn't have any symptoms for it, only a weak immune system. This massive news makes Maddie go crazy, so she shifts through different files and reports from the cabinets. Her mother arrives and asks what she's searching for. Maddie then confronts her about the SCID reports and how she can't find them. Pauline becomes speechless, as she can't give a proper answer why she was lying to Maddie all these years. Maddie becomes extremely frustrated and runs away from home. She goes to a local store and tells Carla to pick her up. Together, they go to Carla's house, where Maddie goes over everything that was done wrong to her. After a few days, they go to visit her mother one last time before leaving. Pauline confesses that after her husband's death, she couldn't afford to lose Maddie, so that's why she kept her in the house. Maddie accepts that somewhat and gives a final hug to her mother. Afterward, she flies to New York and meets Ali in a bookstore. In the final moments of the film, we see the two lovebirds finally get together again. They kiss each other in affection and run outside to the open world of freedom. With this energy, the movie comes to an end. Thanks for watching, guys!